Okay, so today we're gonna look into how to use the group feature of Segment. Um, Maybe not all of you are super familiar with what the group is within Segment, but basically that's a feature that can be mainly used for companies working in a B2B sector, for instance, where you could imagine having multiple users working for the same company that are using a software. So that group feature will allow you to have that different level of granularity of grouping users together into accounts of people, let's say, working at the same place and using your product. So in order to work with that in Segment, you will have to use specific methods that are like made for that in the tool. Let's say the usual method you will be used to work with, and you can find several videos on that in our portfolio. But those methods are mainly the track method to send events, the identify method to manage everything that's identity within Segment, and the page method, which allows you to track page and screen views. So aside for that, there is a force method that can be used quite easily, which is the group method. And that method has several functions to basically send data in Segment. So when you use that group function, there are mainly two things that it does. The first thing is that it associates the current users with a group or an account. So it makes the link basically between the user and the account. That's the first effect of that method. The second method is that if the group doesn't exist, so if the account doesn't exist, it will create it. And you can specify traits, which are exactly the same thing as a trait would be in a user profile, but those traits will be in the account profile. So those are the two main reasons why you would use the group method. What I will do is I will quickly show you in our sandbox how it looks like and what it does exactly and how to use it. So for that, I'm using my sandbox, just sending data from a front-end JavaScript source to my Segment sandbox, and I will show you around how the different things are populating in your code. So if you just look into a very classic, first I'll do a reset to make sure that I'm a new anonymous user here in Segment. Then I will just send a random event, so analytics.track anonymous user event. So here, just sending an event like regular. I have my event here. If I look at the information that's available, my event is anonymous event 1. My anonymous ID is this one, ending with 5D2. So just sending another regular event. Now, if let's say that user is part of Human37, which is our company, and that you want to send that information to Segment in order to first create the company as an account in Segment, and to link that user to the company to specify, okay, that user is working in this company, so whatever that user is doing, it's part of that company, right? For that, you would use the method I was talking about, which is the group method. So for that, you would do analytics.group. Basically, what you need as arguments here, there is only one mandatory argument actually, which is the group ID. See the group ID as being the user ID, but for groups, so for accounts. And here we'd say my group ID, so for my company Human37 would be H37. Very simple, right? If I do that call like this, without any extra information, I'm sending it. I see that I have a group call coming here in my debugger. And if I look at that group call, I see that it comes from my same anonymous ID, because that's the current user that's still browsing. So every event that are coming in segment have to be tied to a user. So here it's tied to that anonymous user. But I see here that I have a group ID, which is my H37. And so we see here that the method is a group and not a track as you had before. What did that just do? So if now I go in my profile section where I can see all my users, and here you see my account. Just a remark here, it might be that in your workspace you do not have that account option under the profile menu. The reason why is that it's not activated by default. So if you want to access the feature, you need to request your account representative at Segment to ask them to activate the feature for you. And once they do, you would see it appearing, and you would be able to use it. So here, if we remember here, so I have my user ending by 5D2. I see in my users here in my Profile Explorer that I have that user, which is 5D2, so it's that user. What I see here as well is there is a tab called Associated Accounts. So if I go in there, what I see now is that user is actually associated to an account. And if I click on that account, I end up on a profile which looks very much like the profile of a user, but which is not the profile of a user, but the profile of an account. It has the same options with the traits. You can do audiences of accounts. You have identities, in which we will find back the group ID, which is H37. And so it basically works exactly the same as the profile of a user. It's just a different level of granularity. It's a different kind of entity within Segment, but it works exactly the same. I also have here the other way around, so the list of users that are part of that account. So I have pretty much all the information. So basically all that we see here is a result of my group call that I made in there. So it created the account in here, in my account section. I have now an account here that is my H37. So it created the account because it was not existing yet. And it linked the current user to that account. Now, if I use again that analytics.group H37, so here the group ID refers to an account that exists already because I just created it with the call right before. But what I will do here is that I will add properties, because you can add properties in a good group call, which actually are traits. So you can set traits of your account using that group method, so exactly the same method. But if you add those properties, the traits, on top of the group ID, what it will do is it will set up also traits in the profile of the account. I could have done it directly here. In that case, the account would have been created with the properties directly, but it can also be done afterwards by recalling that group method on an existing account, and it will just update the profile with the extra trait. So here I will just add a trait that's called name, and I will call it human37 here, and I send my group call. Result of that, right here, exactly the same payload, only difference here, I have the name being human37, very straightforward. So now here, if I update, and it might take a bit of time to update, so maybe you won't see it directly, but let's have a look. If I still look at my same user here, my 5D2 user, and I now look at the associated account, we see that now it's not just account, but it's human37. Why? Is that because now in the profile of that account, I have a trait which is named human37, which is a reserved trait that populates actually the name of the account. For the user, we still have an anonymous user because here we didn't do any identifier or anything on that user, so it remains an anonymous one, but you get the idea. So now basically if I go in here, I see that my account is human37, okay? So that group method, both for initializing the account, adding any traits that you want on that account, and link the current user to the account. Now, what is missing here, if you look at the profile of that account, is basically we don't have any events showing in there. While we want, or we might want, that any events that my user is doing here would populate the profile of the account as well, so that you can have a high-level view of everything all the users of that account are doing, right? What if I now do an analytics.track? Let's call it anonymous user event after grouping. So remember here we made a group call that links the user to an account. What you would expect is that from there, any track event that you do from that user would be also populated in the profile of the account. Let's try it. I have the anonymous user event. Perfect. If I look at my user here, and again, it might take some time, so it might not be here yet, but it is. So here I have the event that I sent, the first event that I sent here before the grouping. And I have my new event, the event after the grouping. So it's there in the profile of the user. But if I look in the profile of the account here, and I look at the event, it's empty. So the events aren't there. Why is that? It's because even if the grouping has been done, events are not sent automatically to the account when it's done by the user. Why? It's because a user can be part of multiple accounts. So let's say a user would be like a freelancer, I don't know, whatever, would be working for different companies on Monday, Tuesday for company A and the rest of the week for company B. Everything is doing on Monday, Tuesday, you want it to appear on the profile of company A, but you don't want it to appear on the profile of company B. If it was automatically sent to the profile of all the accounts that the user is associated with, you will have an issue. So that's basically the reason why it's not done automatically. So how would you make sure that when you send a track event, it's also sent to the profile of the account? It's basically you need to add a property and actually a context property in the track event that you're doing. So now if I retake this one with property in, so in a track call, you may refer to any other video to have that more in detail, but you can have three different sets of arguments there. So the first part is the name of the event. That's the only one that we have used so far. But if you add an extra set of arguments, sorry, it will be the properties of your event. Here, we don't want to send properties, we want to send context information. To send context information, you need to add a third set of arguments. So the third one in the brackets, where you would have the context. And in your context, you would add a property that is the group ID. That group ID, you will set the one of the age 37 here, and so you would say age 37. What this call will do is that it will send the track event, as it always does. It will log it in the profile of the user, as it always does. But on top of that, it will also log that event in the profile of the group. Let's try it. Obviously, I have an error. You have an error that I missed the 2 points here. Up. So if I come back here, I have my track event right here. And what I see that's different from the previous one is that here in the context, I now have a group ID that is populated and that refers to the human 37. So checking in here, again, in the profile of my user, looking at the events, it's not here yet. It will be anytime soon, but I didn't refresh. Here it is, anonymous user after grouping with property in. So it's in here. as usual. But now if I go in my Human37 account and look at the events here, now the event is there. And when you click on that event, you see that that event that is here has been done by that user, and you have all basically the payload of the event, but now it's logged in the profile of the account as well. That's basically the way you would be using the group method and the way you would manage group properly. What you can actually also do, if you want to bypass part of it, let's imagine that you don't want to create the accounts from your front end. You want to initialize them, let's say, at the account creation from a server-side source when the new account is created in your systems. And you don't want that to happen in the front end. So you would do basically the groups call from your backend to create the groups. And you would just want to make sure that when a user is connected and is linked to that account, you make sure that all the events are sent to that account as well, and that the user is associated to the account. If you don't need to also manage the creation of the account from your front end, you can bypass actually the group method. I can show you here. Basically, I will do an analytics.reset so that now I'm a new user. So any event that I will be doing will be from a new user. So let's just do analytics.track new user event, right? So just here, I see now that I'm user AE4, which is not the same as the previous one, which was 5D2. So I'm a new user. Obviously, I'm not linked to any accounts. I won't call the group method to associate that user to my H37 account. So if I look in here at the Profile Explorer, I should have a new anonymous profile that will pop up anytime soon. Once again, it's there. I have my identity, which is my AE4, which is the one, and I don't have any associated account. But if now I do the same event that I did before, you know, the one after the grouping and everything, where I just put the group ID in the context of my track call, if I just do that again, I see here that I have that event that shows up, that event comes from my new user, my new anonymous user, and that this event has in its context the group ID. Once again, here I didn't do a group call with all the effect it has and that we went through previously in the video. But what I did now, just by sending an event with that group ID in the context, if I look at my events here, so my event is still here, but if I look at my associated account, you can see that now in the profile of that new user, I have Human37, despite the fact that I didn't call the group method. And if I go in the profile of the account, Human37, and that I look at the associated user, we see that we now have two users. The first one that I created and that I linked to the account using the group method, and the second one that I associated to account just by sending an event with that group ID in the context. On top of that, when I look at the events, obviously my second event is here as well. So voilà, that's basically how you create a group within Segment, how it looks like in the interface. You have those two methods that can be used depending on what you need to achieve actually in your use case. So if you don't need to create the account from your front end, you don't necessarily need to use the group method. Doesn't mean you can't. Like you can do it. You can use the group method, but you can also bypass it and directly send events with your group ID in the context. One very important point that actually I forgot to cover is that for all this to work, the group ID, which is the ID we've been using so far to identify a group, that group ID need actually to be part of your identity resolution graph. So you see here that in my identity resolution graph, I have email, user ID, anonymous ID, but on top of that, I also have group ID. if this group ID is if this group ID is not there, none of the methods that I showed you will actually work, and you won't see any group being created or anything. So really important to add that one before trying any of that.